Hello and welcome back to FATBOSS TV. Today we're having a look at the second to last boss in Castle Nathria, the Stone Legion Generals.
Yes, this 3-phase fight has a lot going on. Phase 1 has you fight up against one boss whilst the other hits you from the air. Phase 2 they switch places, and then Phase 3 you fight both of them on the ground at once. Now this fight has changed a lot over the course of testing, so some of the footage we have might show mechanics that are no longer in the fight. But we'll do the best with what we have, so let's jump straight into it.
So at the start of the fight, Grishal will fly up into the sky, and the raid will have to fight with Cal. Cal will apply long, low damage heart rend debuffs on multiple players. When these are dispelled or when they expire, the player will gain a new debuff that cannot be dispelled that deals a shitload of damage over 6 seconds. Healers need to make sure that they dispel the original debuff in a staggered way, so all players don't have this dot at the exact same time, because you're probably going to struggle to keep everyone alive. As for tanks, you need to deal with a serrated swipe, which is a big hit that applies a permanent bleed, which increases the damage you take from the swipe by 50% per stack. This bleed can be removed by racials, Kyrian Potion, bops and immunities, but this does not work on Mythic. The only other way to remove the bleed in the fight is to use the Stonebreakers combo. This combo starts with one player who is marked with Crystallize, and after 5 seconds they will burst, and this effect will remove any bleeds to any players that were inside their targeting circle, whilst also stunning them for 4 seconds. As soon as the burst happens, a meteor will then spawn on that location, and all other players need to stack within this to help split the damage for all players that are stunned. Because the tanks can remove their bleed frequently enough during this phase using the meteor, it's not actually necessary for them to taunt swap on the boss. Now, not only tanks need to use the meteor to remove their bleeds, but the raid will also have to do it when they get hit by the wicked blade. 2 players will be marked, and 5 seconds later Cal will throw a blade towards them that will travel to one, bounce to the other, and then return to the boss. Any one hit, including the 2 marked players, will trigger an 8-yard explosion which deals damage and applies this permanent bleed. We found it easiest to set up 2 raid markers around 10 yards apart on one side of the boss, and the 2 players that are marked simply just choose a marker, stand there, get hit, and then return back to the boss, whilst everyone else stays on the opposite side of the boss, because it's very easy to get caught and splash the bleeds all over melee. We recommend that you set up these 2 markers towards the edge of the balcony, as the blade will be thrown from that direction in the next phase, and you might as well get used to that movement during phase 1 before you eventually get into phase 2. Also, you need to get used to moving early if you are marked by this ability, as Grishal will be slowing people with his unavoidable stone spikes throughout the phase, and you cannot afford to be late. Throughout both phase 1 and 2, a Stone Legion Goliath ad will spawn every now and then. This ad needs to be tanked, but otherwise doesn't have any abilities on Heroic until he reaches 20% health. At this health threshold, the ad will stop attacking, the ad will turn to stone and will apply a 10% healing taken reduction stack every second to the entire raid. This caps out at 8 stacks. We found the best way of dealing with this ad was just to tank it near the boss on the side away from the wicked blade markers and just slowly cleave it down, and the moment that it reaches 20% health, we just nuked it as soon as we possibly can just to remove the healing reduction. Once you've got Cal to 50% health, she'll take 95% less damage and the mana phase will begin. All mechanics will continue during this time, but you'll also be swarmed by commando ads that will fly around in the air bombarding your position with swirlies that hit like a truck. The ads will slowly descend one by one, and you need to kill them really fast as they'll drop an animal orb when they die that lasts for 15 seconds. Running over the top of these picks them up, and you need to deliver them to Prince Renathal, and this will give him 10% of his mana back. Once you've given all of his mana back, he will cast Shattering Blast, which removes the damage reduction from the boss, but also deals raid-wide damage and will knock players back. So you need to make sure you're relatively close to him when this is cast, otherwise you will just be knocked off the edge to your death. Once this cast has ended, Cal will switch positions with Grishal, and this is where phase 2 begins.
Now this is where some of the footage is going to get a bit sketchy, but we'll do the best that we can. As mentioned before, Cal will be using her Wicked Blade whilst she's airborne. As this comes from beyond the balcony, make sure you leave that area clear to avoid gaining extra bleeds. She'll also be doing random chain lightning style damage with her ricocheting blades, but you should just be able to stack up and heal through it. Now Grishal will continue to use the Stonebreakers combo to remove the bleeds, but he also has 3 new abilities. Seismic Upheaval marks your location every couple of seconds, and these zones erupt dealing damage, so you just gotta stutter step to avoid them whilst loosely spreading away from other people. Stone Fist is a big hit on the tank that knocks back. This leaves a 40-second debuff increasing the damage taken from this fist, so taunt every 2 hits or so just to keep damage low. His most important ability is Reverberating Eruption, which will mark a player, and then that player will explode shortly afterwards, dealing damage and leaving an 8-yard zone on the ground. The player should place this zone away from the raid and away from the Wicked Blade side of the room. Now each time this is cast, all zones from previous eruptions will also explode, each dealing raid damage. However, a single player can soak one of these previous zones and just take the damage themselves. Now a player can't soak more than one zone at once unless they use an immunity, so the entire raid should spread out to make sure that each zone is covered, because if a couple of them hit the raid, you're very likely going to die. So you continue to deal with these mechanics as well as the Goliath ad until the boss reaches 50% health. You'll have another mana phase where you'll need to feed Renethal so that he casts Shattering Blast, and then phase 3 begins. You'll now be fighting both bosses at once, but you won't have Goliath ads spawning anymore. The two bosses do not share a health pool, and you need to make sure they die within a short time of one another, because when one dies, the other one gains a crazy damage increase. So this is going to be hectic, to say the least, but as long as you maintain positioning for the Wicked Blade while soaking the reverberating eruption zones and removing your bleeds with the combo, hopefully the bosses will die before you do.
As for Mythic, this fight is pretty brutal. As mentioned before, you cannot cheese any of the bleeds, you can only remove them with a combo. The Goliath will jump on people, which stuns them whilst dealing some damage to them, and he will also gain a damage increase every now and then. You'll also have new ads that spawn in quite often, you've probably seen them throughout this video. These will just jump around applying more permanent bleeds, and when they reach low health, they'll start to push everyone off the platform, and this pushback stacks. So if you get them all low at the exact same time, you're not going to be able to outrun the wind, and you're probably just going to fly off the platform. The Heart Rend debuff also applies a hard-hitting dot to the healer that dispelled it, so you need to make sure you spot heal that healer as well as the initial debuff target. The mana phases are far more brutal as well, and this is where we struggled, as when you pick up the mana orbs on the ground, holding it does a shitload of damage, and also each time you deliver it, will do raid damage and knock anyone back within 30 yards of Renethal, meaning that you have to give him mana one by one slowly over time, rather than just throwing everything into him as soon as possible just to end the phase. But that's the encounter. What do we think?
So yeah, this fight is quite hard to be concise with our feedback here, as it's just changed so much since the last Heroic test. You know, it was one way where you're fighting the two bosses pretty much simultaneously on Heroic, and they'll take turns at being immune to damage. It was shit. It was not great.
It was like playing phase 3, but all of the mechanics were kind of different. They're not really relevant to how the fight is now.
Yeah, exactly. And then once they were done with that and was like, oh, that fight's kind of meh, they brought it out on Mythic, and it was a completely, they revamped everything. They changed, you know, to the whole thing where one boss is up in the air and one's on the ground and they take turns. And it did feel a lot better to play. But of course, because it's Mythic and it is the second to last boss, you know, it's quite difficult to see the entire thing. So, you know, we're somewhat limited. But there's certain aspects of the fight that we did see that I've got some thoughts on, at least. And my main thing is that I actually really like how you have to do damage on this fight, especially on Mythic. Just because, you know, you've got the ads that are coming in. Your first instinct is, okay, nuke everything. Get your barrages out, get your starfalls out, just nuke everything down, just grab them underneath the boss. If you do that, you are definitely going to die, because not only is the knockback stacking up, but you've got other mechanics going on as well. So you don't want to bring those ads to low health when you've got a Wicked Blade going on, or when you have a Stonebreaker's combo going on, because you're not going to be able to maintain the positioning needed in order to deal with it, which is kind of neat. And I can imagine in phase 2 as well, where you need to go soak the erupting zones, if you have 3 people getting knocked back, no, that's just not going to happen. You're all going to be lobbed off the edge. So you've got to control your damage. You've got to sit there and be patient, which is very difficult when you're a good AoE class. It's like, you've got to be patient. And it goes for the same thing when you get the healing reduction as well. You don't want to proc that healing reduction when there's a shit ton of raid damage going on.
Such as when you've just dispelled dots.
Yeah, or a Stonebreaker's combo. You know, with all of those things at once, it does make things really, really nasty. So it's kind of neat that you get to dictate when those things come in. There's a bit of a timer. You got to kind of keep moving with it, but you know, you do get to dictate when those overlaps happen, and I think there's a lot of interesting ideas for that. And I imagine on farm, those ads are going to come in and then they'll be dead. That's it. They just suddenly explode.
Yeah, then you can just like completely whore the entire time,
which could be fun.
When it comes down to prog, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what sort of timers guilds go for. There might even be opportunities where you keep a lot of ads up and you just blow them all up in one set of CDs or something.
Yeah, it certainly could happen, 100%. And talking about prog, for the first people that are going to arrive to this boss, it doesn't really matter for the rest of us. When we get there, it'll be fine, I'm sure. But when those, you know, when Echo gets there and when Limit gets there, they're going to get a boss that I think might be bugged to tits. Every single time we've done this fight, it's been really sketchy. Even like, especially the mana phase. I don't know what's up with that mana phase, but either the ads don't spawn or too many spawn. Sometimes they never land on the platform. Sometimes right at the beginning of the mana phase, here, everyone gets to deliver anima because you just get the debuff applied to you. And it's like,
just die.
Yeah, that deals damage. A lot of it that requires spot healing. Yeah, it's a little bit shaky, and especially with it being around Christmas, I just feel bad for the devs as well. You're going to be there on Christmas Day, like desperately trying to code in to make sure this this fucking phase works properly. So hopefully it isn't bugged, because I think that if this fight is working properly, it could be very, very good.
Yeah, I can see that.
The only other thing that I'm a little bit concerned of as well is necessarily the pacing of it, because you're spending, at least for us, we're spending quite a lot of time in phase 1, just because the bosses have quite a large health pool. It feels like you're spending 3 minutes in one phase, 3 minutes in the next phase, and then 3 minutes when the bosses are probably together as well, right at the very end. And I don't think there's enough variation for that to be like a 9 or 10 minute long fight. Maybe our damage was a little bit low. You know, it's tuned weirdly on PTR, but I don't really want this fight to be super, super long. I don't think it really deserves to be super long, just because eventually things start to repeat and it's like, oh, okay, we know what we're doing.
It'd be a good, like, 7-minute fight.
I think 7 minutes, yeah. I think would be a good duration for this fight. But I guess we'll have to see. But maybe there's some overlaps that we're yet to see, and I'm sure this boss will be completely different when it comes out in a couple weeks' time.
But thank you very much for watching, guys. If you'd like to keep completely up to date with all of the bosses in Castle Nathria, then do go check out our guides over on Wowhead. The moment any new strategies or any boss changes are made, it's all updated there. And as always, very importantly for this one, we will have completely up-to-date guides as soon as the instance comes out in a couple of weeks' time. But thanks again for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.
Thanks for watching.